Every night for 3 years, I sat at the dinner table with my mum, and not once did she see that my plate was completely bare. My father's plan was simple. He would systematically starve only one of his children. Me. Not my brother with his effortless charm and trophies lining his shelves. Just me, the older son who, in my father's eyes, consumed too much of everything. I was 11 when it first became a public performance. We were all seated, and my mum glanced over, a puzzled look on her face. Why isn't there any food on Micah's plate? Before I could utter a single word, my father's hand clamped down on my neck. He squeezed, a silent warning. He already ate honey and a big snack after practice, right, champ? My mum just smiled, her mind already drifting to her next shift, and that was that. From that moment, my father got clever. My mum's 16-hour nursing shifts meant dinner time was his kingdom to rule. By the time I was 13, the routine was absolute law. Every morning at precisely 6:59 a.m, while my mum was already on her way to the hospital, my dad would march me to the garage. He'd pull the scale out from behind the tool chest. 112 pounds, he announced one particular morning. Up 2 pounds from yesterday. No breakfast or lunch today. But Dad, I'm supposed to be growing. I was cut off by the sound of lunchboxes being snapped open. My brother Theo's box held a sandwich, chips and a granola bar. Mine held 3 celery sticks and a single rice cake. Dad, please, I'm so hungry. He pressed a finger to his lips. Shh, do you hear that? That's your mum's car pulling out of the driveway. Unless you want Theo to skip meals too, you'll smile and say goodbye like a good son. I tried to tell my mum. I gave her signs. Is it normal to feel dizzy when you stand up? I asked one evening. My dad's laugh filled the room, warm, easy, the kind of laugh that made everyone trust him. You know how teenage boys are, growing like weeds and forgetting to drink water. I was the same in his age. By winter, my body was starting to break down in ways Dad couldn't hide. My hair was falling out in clumps, leaving a trail in the shower drain I was too exhausted to clean. After I fainted at practice, my punishment was watching my family eat pizza while I sat with a glass of ice water. The night my mum texted she was coming home early, I saw panic flash across my father's face. He scrambled to make a plate look normal from a distance. When she walked in, she sighed with relief. Good, everyone's eating. That was the moment I gave up. One morning, I stared at the mirror and didn't see the skeleton everyone else saw. I saw exactly what my father had been telling me for years. I was taking up too much space. I was carrying too much weight. You're right, I told him at breakfast, my voice flat. I'm disgusting. I don't deserve food. For the first time in 2 years, he looked uncertain. Well, maybe just a quarter of an apple. No, I'm too fat for food. You were right, Dad. We both knew the truth. If I didn't eat, I would eventually die. I was too far gone to care anymore, but my father cared. If I died, it would mean lawsuits, investigations, a life in prison. He couldn't have that. That night, my mum noticed. Where's Micah's plate? Not hungry, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. The room went dead silent, broken only by the angry growl of my stomach. My dad started to speak, but for the first time he had no lie ready. I haven't seen Micah eat in 3 days, my mum said slowly, the pieces clicking together in her mind. 2 days later, I collapsed right in front of her. How could a mother not see what was happening to her own son? We need to take him to the hospital. So you don't trust me? I'm his father, he snapped. That's not what I'm... Are you seriously undermining me in front of the boys? His voice cracked in the perfect performance. I do everything, and it's still not enough for you. I'm sorry, you're right, you've been handling it. She dropped it, and I was left to fall a little deeper into the abyss. Then came my awards ceremony in May. I'd won an academic achievement award. It turns out when you can't sleep because of the hunger, you have a lot of time to study. Walking to the stage felt like wading through thick water. As I reached the podium, my sleeve slid back, revealing a wrist that looked like a bundle of dry twigs. Someone gasped as I collapsed to the floor, unable to move. Micah, my mum's voice cut through the chaos. She was standing, her eyes wide, finally seeing what the baggy clothes had hidden for so long. My dad rushed the stage like he'd been shot from a cannon. Eat something, he was shouting, trying to force food into my mouth in front of 300 people. But I was calm. I was done. But Dad, you said I'm too fat, remember? Every morning when you weigh me. My mum's days contorted as everything clicked together. The last thing I heard before passing out was my brother Theo's voice, high and terrified, finally speaking the truth. Dad made me put laxatives in Micah's food when he did eat. I woke up in the hospital to my mum's sobs. My son is 6 feet tall and weighs 126 pounds, and I ate dinner with him every night. The doctor's voice was professionally calm, but I could hear the undertone of disgust. Mrs. Vance, he's been systematically starved for approximately 3 years. His heart shows signs of chronic malnutrition. If he'd continued for another 48 hours, we'd be having a very different conversation. My dad played his last card. He was across the room, a security guard watching him. He made me do it, he said, his voice steady as a snake. She was obsessed with having lean sons. I was protecting him from worse. They removed my mum from the house that night, pending an investigation. My dad's story was convincing enough to create doubt. My brother was too scared to say anything. Lying in that hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines, I smiled, because I knew exactly what I had to do. This wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about revenge. It was about making it right. The beeping monitors pulled me back to consciousness the next morning. My body felt hollow, like a house stripped of all its furniture. Dr. Elena Rhodes came in with a thick folder. She was worried. She sat next to me and explained that I had refeeding syndrome. If they gave me normal amounts of food, my organs could shut down from the shock. They had to feed me in tiny increments, monitoring my heart. It felt like my dad was still controlling what went into my body through these medical rules. Later that afternoon, a man named Roland Ashcroft appeared at my bedside. Right behind him came my dad. Dad grabbed my hand, squeezing hard enough to hurt. Roland asked me questions about what happened at home. Every time I tried to explain the morning weigh-ins, my dad would interrupt with gasps and sobs. She was obsessed with having lean sons. Please, Micah, tell him about your mother, he pleaded, a twisted performance of a concerned father. I tried to tell Roland about the scale in a garage, the 112-pound goal, but my voice kept shaking. Dad kept talking over me, painting a picture of himself as a trapped victim, forced to enforce her mum's brutal rules. That night, a different social worker came. She told me my mum had been removed from our home. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. This was my fault. If I'd have just spoken up sooner, none of this would be happening. My mum was being punished for my father's crimes. 3 days passed in a blur and blood draws and tiny meals. On the 3rd day, I finally got the courage to tell my nurse the truth. He listened, his eyes growing wider as I described the 659 wains, the hidden scale, laxatives. He wrote everything down. He promised to pass it along to the medical team. The next morning, Dr. Elena Rhodes came in with a camera. She was gentle but thorough, documenting my thinning hair, the sores on my shins, the sharp angles of my collarbones. She ordered x-rays to show bone density loss. She wanted to prove this had been happening for years. Mr. O'Connell, my school principal, visited. He'd been at the ceremony. He'd heard what I said. He thought he could get a copy of the audio recording from the AV department. He looked at my arms and his eyes welled up. He promised to help. 2 days later, my dad showed up at the hospital in a huge performance. He carried bags of food, crying loudly in the hallway about how the system was keeping him from his sick son. Security had to physically escort him out. I watched him fight against their grip like a caged animal. The next afternoon, a woman in a sharp grey suit appeared in my room. Her name was Vanessa Voss. Mum had hired her. She spread papers across my bedside table, explaining custody hearings, evidence, legal terms. My head spun. A week later, Roland came back. This time, my dad wasn't there, but his questions made me want to scream. Are you sure you didn't misunderstand his concern for your health? He was sceptical. I could feel my chance at justice slipping away. The next morning, Theo showed up. Dad was standing right in the doorway, watching like a hawk. Theo's eyes were puffy. He gave me a tiny hug. He started talking about school stuff. When Dad turned to talk to a nurse, he pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. Later, I unfolded it. It just said, "I'm sorry," with a little heart. I asked the nurse for a notebook. I started writing. My hand cramped up, but I kept going. I wrote about the 659 weigh-ins, the celery sticks, the ice water, watching my family eat pizza, the laxatives. I filled 30 pages. On my 5th day, they started physical therapy. I could barely make it 10 feet down the hole. My legs shook like jelly. The therapist was kind. He explained my muscles had been eating themselves. It would take months to rebuild. Meanwhile, Vanessa worked on getting an emergency protective order so Mum could see us. She filed the paperwork, including my written confession. 3 days later, she called. The judge denied it. We didn't have enough proof yet. How could the truth not be proof? The anger in my chest was like fire. I told Vanessa we had to find more. The next day, Mr. O'Connell arrived with a USB drive.
We played the audio from the awards ceremony, but the quality was terrible, lost and static. He promised to keep looking. Roland came back with a folder from my school. He'd gotten the athletic trainer's records, 17 documented incidents of fainting over 2 years. He added them to his file. It was progress. A week into my stay, the discharge planner told me I couldn't go home. I was being moved to a step-down recovery program, a halfway house for kids with eating disorders. It was 40 minutes away. While all this was happening, my dad started posting on social media. He wrote about being falsely accused. He posted old pictures of us laughing at the lake. The comments were split. Reading them made my stomach hurt. Dr. Rhodes came in on day 9 with a stack of lab results. My iron was dangerously low. My heart showed damage. My bone density was like an old man's. It was irrefutable evidence of what he had done. Vanessa called. She was subpoenaing pharmacy records. She wanted to show a pattern of Dad buying laxatives in bulk. Roland visited the house while Dad was at work. He found the scale behind the tool chest. There were tiny marks scratched into the concrete beside it. Dozens of them. Hundreds. He took photos. He realized each mark represented a morning I'd been weighed. The next day, Dad found out. By the time Roland went back, the kitchen looked like a magazine. It was spotless, full of fresh fruit and meal planning charts. My new therapist at the facility was a man named Silas Brand. He had a calm way of talking. He taught me to tell my story without emotion. Stick to the facts, he said. Judges listen better to facts than feelings. Mom finally got a supervised visit. She walked in, staring at me like she was seeing a ghost. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I'm so sorry. I told her to stop. Theo and I need you to fight, not fall apart. Mr. O'Connell called. He found a backup system, a recording for the listening hearing. The audio was crystal clear. My voice, Dad's panicked voice, Theo's terrified confession. He made copies for Vanessa. 2 nights later, my phone rang. It was Theo. He was whispering. He said Dad had been taking him to doctor appointments for stomach problems he didn't have. My whole body went cold. I knew what my father was doing. In my next therapy session, I stood up too fast and collapsed. Dr. Rhodes said the stress was making my recovery slower. Roland tried to talk to Theo at school. Theo barely spoke. The system moved so slow, while Dad had all the time in the world to coach him. Vanessa met with me. The judge wants more proof, she said. She showed me the state recording laws. This is a one-party consent state. You can legally record phone calls. The next afternoon, I sat in Vanessa's office. My hands were shaking. I dialed my father's number. He picked up with a fake warm voice. I told him I was confused. Maybe we could talk. He jumped on it. I only ever wanted what was best for you, he said. The doctors are blowing it out of proportion. I was teaching you discipline. The scale was for accountability. He went on for 20 minutes. He talked about how kids today are soft. He said I should be grateful he cared. When I asked about the laxatives, he got quiet. Sometimes you needed help staying clean. Vanessa saved the recording. 3 days later, she called excited. The pharmacy records came through. Every 2 to 3 weeks for 2 years, Dad bought the same brand of the same laxatives in bulk. The dates matched my worst collapses. Roland finally admitted it looked like systematic abuse, but the process was slow. Every day Theo was still in that house, I felt I was failing Theo. Mr. O'Connell got 5 teachers to write statements. They all mentioned noticing the weight loss. My history teacher, the coach, my chemistry teacher, they all felt guilty for not doing more. Dr. Rhodes spent a whole afternoon writing her medical report. It was 15 pages. Her professional opinion stated it was medical child abuse, not an eating disorder. 2 weeks before the hearing, my dad caused a scene in the facility parking lot. He was holding grocery bags, crying, yelling about wanting to feed his boy. Security had to remove him. 2 days later, the hearing was moved up. We had 4 days. Silas put me through intense practice. He played the role of the enemy lawyer, asking the same brutal questions over and over. 3 deep breaths. Keep your hands folded, he'd say. Theo managed to sneak me Dad's training log, a notebook with dates, numbers, and notes about my compliance, Dad's own handwriting. But Vanessa said we had a problem. Theo took it without permission. The chain of custody was broken. We sent it to a handwriting expert anyway. 2 weeks later, I went back to school. Kids stared. They whispered. But I kept my head up. What would you do if the world thought you were the liar? I woke up at 2 a.m. with my heart racing. I used the breathing exercises. I counted backwards. I calmed myself. Alone. Vanessa called with more bad news. Dad filed an emergency motion claiming Mom was coaching me to lie. We filed a counter motion with the pharmacy records. A reporter from the local paper called. The article came out. Everyone in town knew it was about us. The district attorney's office got involved. Dr. Rhodes met with them about criminal neglect charges. Then Theo did something incredible. He recorded Dad coaching him on what to tell the judge. Say Mom never let us have seconds. Dad's voice was clear. Theo gave the recording to Roland. 2 days before the next court date, the judge reviewed the new evidence. He ordered supervised contact. Dad couldn't be alone with us anymore. Relief flooded through me. But at the first supervised visit, Dad grabbed my wrist hard. He whispered threats about ruining his life. Theo cried. I stayed blank. I wrote it down. Dad brought his mother in. My grandmother tells me families forgive. She said Dad only wanted me to be strong. I stared at her. Dad weighed me at 6:55 a.m. every morning. He decided if I ate. She called me dramatic and left. Vanessa hired a private investigator named Wendell. He dug into Dad's finances. He found a secret account, a boat. Dad had been draining the joint account for 2 years. He found the laxative purchases on the credit card statements. Then Dr. Rhodes examined Theo. The pattern had started. His weight had dropped 6 pounds in a month. She understood it immediately. Dad had simply moved on to his next target. The case hit a wall. Roland was pulled off our file. A new worker, Deline Marsh, took over. She was skeptical. Are you sure your mother didn't influence your memories? I felt the whole case sliding backward. Vanessa filed a formal complaint. Roland was reinstated 9 days later. Meanwhile, Dad started a fundraiser online. He raised $4,000 from strangers who believed him. He did an interview on the news, dabbing his eyes. People sent me messages calling me a liar. Security at the facility had to be increased. The handwriting experts' results came back. They confirmed the log was in Dad's hand. The ink was consistent over the 2-year period, but we still had the chain of custody problem. We subpoenaed the original log directly. Dad's lawyers struck back. He produced Coach Renfo, who claimed he'd seen Mom criticize my eating. Vanessa dug into it. She found Dad had loaned Renfo money. She subpoenaed Renfo's records. The dates didn't line up. Renfo crumbled in his deposition. How far can a lie stretch before it snaps? Vanessa subpoenaed Dad's phone records and search history. It was the smoking gun. He'd researched how far he could push a growing boy's body. He looked up warning signs dachshunds look for. He looked up how to fight custody battles. He knew exactly what he was doing. Then the searches shifted. They became about Theo. The same body, the same methods. Within 48 hours, an emergency order removed Theo from Dad's custody. He was placed with our maternal grandfather, a quiet man who held my hand and apologized for not trusting his own eyes. Theo will never skip a meal, he promised. That night, I slept without waking up. But Dad didn't give up. He showed up at Theo's school. He tried to get him in the truck. A teacher blocked him. The whole thing was caught on camera. Attempted custodial interference, Vanessa said. The district attorney filed criminal charges, child endangerment, criminal neglect. Dad posted bail and returned to his fundraiser. I woke up with my heart skipping. I had an arrhythmia, a lingering effect of the starvation. Dr. Rhodes said the stress was making it worse. Let the adults carry more of the weight, she said. But I couldn't.
When I could see the finish line. A week before the hearing, Dad's lawyer tried to suppress all our evidence. He argued the log was stolen, the recording was entrapment, the search history was illegal. Vanessa fought it all. The judge ruled against every single motion. Then a classmate named Priya reached out. She'd been filming the ceremony. She had the whole collapse on video. It was a moment from a third angle. Impossible to argue it was altered. Our grandfather started getting harassed. Dad's supporters left notes on his door. They followed him in their cars. Vanessa documented it all. Theo finally told his whole story to Silas, how Dad had made him crush the pills, the same ritual with the scale. Dr. Rhodes documented Theo's early malnutrition markers. 4 days before court, Dad's lawyer offered a deal. Drop the no-contact order, agree to reunification counselling, and he'd agree to supervised visits. Vanessa left it up to me. I said no. I hadn't starved myself half to death so Dad could keep a foot in the door. Mum came to see me the night before the hearing. She told me she'd carry the guilt for the rest of her life. I told her the truth. When she stood up at the ceremony and screamed my name, it was the first time in years I felt like a person.
The hearing got pushed a week. A nurse who was supposed to testify got intimidating messages. Someone showed up at his apartment. We reported it as witness intimidation. The neighbours across the street had a doorbell camera. Wendell pulled the archive. Morning after morning, Mum's car backing out at 6:52, 6:53, 6:54. And then the garage light clicking on seconds later. Wendell went back to the house with Roland. This time they found a locked mini fridge behind the tall chest. Inside were the foods Dad kept for himself and Theo, and a prototype notebook. The first log from when I was 10. Cold, calculated notes on how little I could eat and still walk to school. It had been a plan from the beginning. Mum passed her home study. She had no scale in her new apartment. Vanessa deposed Dad. She played the recording of his phone call. She walked him through the dates. She read him the line from his own notebook about how many calories I could survive on. By the end, his smooth act had crumbled. He was just cold, irritated. He wasn't sorry. Dad refused a plea deal. He couldn't admit it. The morning of the hearing, he called me. "It's not too late to be a family," he said. "I forgive you." I let him talk. Then I told him one true thing. I remember every single morning, 6:55 a.m. in groups of 7, I hung up and reported the call. The morning of the hearing was surreal. Mum drove me. There were supporters outside with signs, but their words slid off me. Inside the courtroom, I saw Dad. He looked at me like I was a number on his scale. For a second, the old fear reached at my spine. Then I remembered the tally marks, all the mornings I survived him. I took the stand. Vanessa asked me to describe the morning weigh-ins. I told them everything. The 6:55 a.m. weigh-ins, the celery sticks, the ice water, watching my family eat pizza, the laxatives. Dad fake sobbed at his table, but I kept talking. Can you imagine seeing your own father cry and knowing it was a lie? Dad's lawyer cross-examined me. You tried to make me angry. You were a difficult teenager, weren't you? I came back to the fact. Dad weighed me at 6:55 a.m. every morning and decided if I ate based on the number. He tried to confuse the timeline. Can you give me the exact date from 3 years ago? I couldn't, but I can tell you the time, 6:55 a.m. every single day. The doorbell camera and his own notebook fill in the rest. Then he tried the last thing. He tried to make me pity Dad. He believed he was helping you. Can you really judge his intentions? I was ready. A father who loves his son doesn't calculate how few calories the boy can survive on. I don't need to judge his intentions. He wrote them down in his own handwriting. The lawyer sat down. He had no more questions. Mr. O'Connell played the audio from the ceremony. My thin voice, Dad's panic screaming, Theo's confession. The judge's face grew harder with every word. Then Renata played Priya's video. The same moment, a completely different source. Impossible to stage, she said. The athletic trainer testified. 17 incident reports. 5 teachers corroborated the story. 4 Dad's co-worker testified about the company picnic. He apologised to me from the stand. Dr. Rhodes brought her charts. The descending red line of my weight. The laxative purchases. The school collapses. All connected by a red thread. Then she testified about Theo. The same fingerprints. 3 years later. Roland testified about the phone search history, the plan, the shift in focus onto Theo. He played the parking lot video. He detailed the witness intimidation. The judge listened to it all. The guardian ad litem, Ingrid, testified. In 20 years, I have rarely met a parent so hollow. Mum took the stand. She didn't make excuses. I trusted the wrong person and my son paid for it. The judge interviewed Theo in chambers. When he returned, he stated, the younger child described a hidden scale, a 6:55 a.m. weighing, and a recent shift of focus onto himself. He was credible. Finally, Dad took the stand. He couldn't stop himself. He lectured the courtroom about discipline and accountability. He said monitoring a child's weight was responsible parenting. The judge cut him off. I've heard enough. Vanessa gave her closing argument. She held up the 2 notebooks, the pharmacy records, the financial forensics, the recordings, the tally marks, the descending red line. This was a man who wrote his cruelty down and refined it. And then she turned to the part that mattered most. This case isn't just about what was done to Micah. It's about what is being done right now to a 10-year-old boy. The court has the rare and terrible privilege of seeing the beginning of an abuse it can actually stop. A man who cannot recognise starvation as harm in a courtroom will not recognise it at the dinner table. The truth doesn't need a story, it just needs to be told. The judge ruled. No unsupervised contact. Mum got full custody, the criminal charges would go to trial, Dad would face a jury. A few weeks after the hearing, I went to Theo's baseball game. Grandpa was there, cheering loud. Mum was there. Theo hit a double. The sound of the crowd was warm. Later, I drove past our old house. The garage was empty. The scale was gone. The marks were still there, scratched into the concrete in groups of 7. But they weren't a record of my shame. They were a record of every morning I survived a man who was trying to erase me. The child abuse counsellor told me I could decide who to tell my story to. A reporter asked if I would go on the record. I thought about it. I thought about the kids sitting on empty plates right now, believing they deserved it. I said yes. Every empty plate has a story. This one is mine. After the case, Dad's online support is stattered. His mother stopped posting. Coach Renfro stopped returning his calls. The lie collapsed in on itself. It's not a straight line. Some days I still hear his voice in my head announcing a number, but I eat anyway. I choose to eat. I look at my little brother. He's getting taller. He laughs. He has colour in his cheeks. And he'll never wake up at 6:55 a.m. to find a stale waiting for him in the garage. That's why I fought. That's why I survived. 6:55 a.m. is just a time now, not a sentence. This is my story, but so many others are still being written. If you found this powerful, drop a like. And if you're sitting at an empty table, please know that your plate deserves to be full. It's not your fault. Don't ever stop fighting.